Welcome, once again, to Pandora's box. Well, you can tell by the way I use my walk, I'm a woman's man, no time at all. She can't lay. I said that's alright, it's okay. You can look the other way. We can try to understand. Staying alive, staying alive, staying alive, staying alive, ha 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 ha, staying alive, staying alive, ha 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 ha, staying alive. Yeah, so you are listening to Pandora's Box on Aspen Waite Radio. You might also be watching us on the Tubes, or on Spotify, whichever form you're listening to us on. We appreciate every single one of you. Thanks for being here with us again this week. As always, we will be bringing you a plethora of interesting factoids, and we'll be having a little laugh along the way. How are you fellas doing this week? All right?
Yeah, man.
Yeah?
Feeling groovy. Feeling good.
Have you guys been keeping up to date with like the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case at all?
Meg has. I haven't.
Yeah.
But,
I've slipped off a bit.
I would. The momentum is so much in Johnny Depp's favour. I would say.
What's going on, man? What's been happening?
Well, since let me just try and think. Like, actually, in terms of like details.
Since the poo on the bed.
Yeah. since bed poo gate.
I saw some bits of her basically just getting like ruined. But what's the woman's name? Like Camila.
Vasquez. Camille Vasquez.
Yeah,
that's
and everyone's saying that they love her.
Oh yeah, they do love her. Yeah, so
not Valdez.
No, not Agent Valdez from Power. Jimmy. Shout out Angela Valdez from Power. Big Mexicana. Wasn't really that big. Tall. That's a better way to describe it. Very petite, actually. If you want to be serious about it.
Petite and tall.
Yeah, petite and tall. But, she's just sort of like all of her quote-unquote evidence, like not Amanda. What's her name? What's her name?
Valdez.
Amber Heard.
Amber Heard.
All of her quote-unquote evidence just isn't really... I don't even know who she is. I'm like, Amanda Heard?
I did hear like Kate Moss is going to
take the stand, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Amber Heard brought Kate Moss up during one of her testimonies and like said something like that she was
about the pushing down the stairs.
Yeah, she's like making out that like she was like scared that Johnny Depp was going to like push her sister down the stairs, and that's why she like lamped Johnny Depp one of the times. And she was like, yeah, because I heard that you like pushed Kate Moss down the stairs or something. And then when she said that, Johnny Depp's lawyer went like that and then like turned and like spoke to him, and then literally came out the next day that like Kate Moss was going to take the stand in defense of Johnny Depp. And it was obviously like it must be one of those things where like she like mentioned Kate Moss, and then they probably had already like prepared for it, like if she tries to use like this X as an example or whatever, then they probably had already contacted them and been like, would you be willing to testify for Johnny? So it'd be interesting to see what Kate Moss says.
Didn't Amber Heard like react to it as well? She said her name and was like...
I can't remember that. You can tell she said like a couple of stuff and then almost being like,
I just keep seeing that meme of like, and my dad's still on the bee.
Yeah, it's so weird, isn't it? So there was one I watched from literally what was it? Tuesday, and it was like this like essentially like this holiday, this like VIP holiday home owner that said that he doesn't really know Johnny Depp or Amber Heard, but he said that like he owns this property, and he like years ago they went and stayed there, and he said that Johnny Depp was like really really nice and like friendly, and that Amber Heard didn't really speak to him at all. And he said, and then they basically had like people over and having this like party here in this like really nice like sort of holiday retreat. He said, and as like the night got on, he just remembers like he was there for like whatever reason, and he just remembers that like Amber Heard just went like nuts on Johnny Depp, and she said that like from like watching them, he was like cowering away from her. And like seemed like he was trying to get away from the conversation, and she was the one that was being super aggressive and shouting at him. So obviously like that was just like one testimony, just like extra evidence that actually she's the one that's always been aggressive with him, and it almost like takes the mick that she's the one that's now, you know what I mean, like slandering him by saying that he's like abusive and stuff like that. Obviously like his like wife of like 14 years who like the mother of his kids said that like never once was like remotely abusive to her, and that he's just like a nice like sweet kind guy. So it was like Winona Ryder's come out, she didn't say that she didn't go into into court and say it, but she's like said it publicly, like
Okay.
on social media and stuff like that.
Winona Ryder. Oh yeah, I know.
She was in
Winona
Stranger
Ryder.
Things and stuff as like the mum.
Yeah.
Like cool lady. But yeah, lots of other stuff. Also, like it was like Amber Heard tried to get this like psychiatrist who had like supposedly had like psychoanalyzed Johnny Depp as like a guy that was like a like high risk abuser, but he never even met Johnny Depp in his life. So he was just like ripped to shreds on the stand.
Yeah.
They were like, how can you do a psychological evaluation of somebody you've never met? And he was like, and he was a really weird guy as well. He kept going like,
oh god,
What the heck?
yeah, you can watch clips of it on like
Oh my
YouTube and stuff, and
God.
he's like gurning and making weird faces.
they're really scraping the bottom of the barrel then.
And he
for
just
people.
and his hair's all mental. Like I consider myself a pretty like rough and ready guy, but like I brush my hair before I go out. Like that's like if I'm not going to court. Like if I was going to court, I'd make sure I looked smart. But his hair was all like this, and he looked like really wide eyed and like mental.
I can't wait to see some of these.
Yeah.
It's all like pop.
Crazy.
It's popcorn for everyone. Popcorn watching, isn't
yeah,
it?
It's like
yeah,
weird
yeah.
how it's like weird how almost like addicted the whole thing is. But yeah, and he was just getting ripped to shreds, and they were saying something like, isn't it against like the American like this is obviously isn't exactly what it's called, but they were saying like, isn't it against like the American like psychiatrist like foundation or whatever's like legal guidelines, like you can't make a diagnosis about somebody if you haven't ever like personally spent time with them. And he was like trying to argue that's not the case and stuff, and he was getting really flustered, and he was actually getting like almost like aggro at certain stages, and the judge had to be like, can you just answer the questions, like calm down, answer the questions. And then he was like, sorry, Your Honor. And then there were times where like it was like weird, like they would ask him questions, then he would just sit there for a minute, and then they'd turn to the judge and be like, do I have to answer that, Your Honor? And she was like, yes, you have to answer the questions, that's why you're here. And it was like,
What?
Yeah, it was like really weird. And then he'd be like, oh, okay. And it just the whole thing just like made her look
So
even
strange.
worse, and just
That's
seemed really
crazy.
strange. Yeah, it's really quite funny, right? Quite funny. And then there was like another one. Oh, I just sort of in a way, it is definitely like embarrassing for her, but she's brought it on herself. It was like there was another bit where she was trying to compare herself to like other celebrities, and then saying that actually because of the whole Johnny Depp situation, she's the one that's like lost out. And she was almost like implying that when Aquaman came out, because she plays that role in Aquaman with Jason Momoa, that she was like on par with like certain other celebrities, and the ones that she used as examples I think were like Jason Momoa, Gal Gadot, who played Wonder Woman, and Zendaya, you know, from like Spider-Man.
That's crazy.
And then Johnny Depp's like they got in this like expert, I think he's called it something like a Q score expert, or something like what the Q score or the Q test, something like that is. It's like it analyzes all of social media, general media, and everything, and then it basically gives somebody like a score. And it's a bit weird, really. But basically, they were saying like from the score, you could see like before anything the Johnny Depp stuff happened, there was like Jason Momoa and Gal Gadot were like basically, it was something like on this graph that they'd made, it was like something like Gal Gadot and Jason Momoa were like really high up.
Yeah.
And I think like to modern day, like Zendaya was actually the highest one, but then it was basically like Amber Heard was like right like down, and it was like nowhere near.
Yeah.
It wasn't. She didn't even have like 50% as much attention. They were saying like the fact that she's comparing herself to these people in itself is like silly. It's not honest. Like in her head, she's comparing herself and like trying to make out that she was
compared to the metrics of data of people, how many people are getting times they're getting mentioned in socials and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
and they were just saying like in general, like she just hasn't garnered that much interest. And they were saying, and also there's from metrics you can see almost like how likable somebody is, and what that takes into account is not just like how much press somebody is getting, but how much good press somebody's getting. And in terms of, I think overall press, I think Gal Gadot was the highest. But then if you want to take it just in terms of good press, Jason Momoa had the highest. But they were saying, but whichever way you want to like make it, Amber Heard not only had by far the lowest in general, but she also had the highest negative press.
Really?
So it was like whichever way.
This must be so like
So she's just sitting there and she's
just like putting your life on show like that. Like I would hate to do that.
Really
Whatever position I was in,
especially for somebody that's like clearly like a bit of a narcissist.
Yeah.
Like she must have such a like sometimes it almost looks like you can tell she's just like bubbling with anger.
It's just so weird something like this playing out.
Yeah.
Just in
Have you
normal
seen that
society.
apparently Jason Momoa is like is saying that he wants her taken, because they filmed Aquaman 2 and he wants her taken out of it now.
Well, this is one of the things that they were talking about.
And there's been like a big campaign online and everything to like get her removed.
How could you take her out of it? Like,
it's been done before, apparently. Just
get a recast.
Apparently she's only got 10 minutes of screen time
in Aquaman 2.
In Aquaman 2.
And over 3 million people, or something like 3 million people, have like signed a petition because they're saying they don't want her to be in Aquaman 2. But also, it's not just that. She's trying to make out that the whole Johnny Depp situation has like ruined her things with her like chances with Aquaman 2 and all of this. But then on the trial on Monday, the head producer of Aquaman went on the stand and said that it had zero to do with Johnny Depp, and it had 100% to do with the fact that Amber Heard and Jason Momoa had zero chemistry with each other on the set. That apparently Jason Momoa, he didn't say it to do with the case, but you can find articles with him sort of being honest, or like interviews with him being sort of honest, saying that like he was trying to form a connection with Amber Heard on set, because obviously if you're playing like a love interest, you at least want to spend some time together away from the screen, just to build a bit of a connection, so that you can, as an actor, you can accurately fake that love and affection. Do you know what I mean? And he said that like whenever he'd approach her, she would just almost like ignore him, and he was a bit like, this is really hard. And apparently it was almost like the opposite of
what, you like my muscles and my beard and my
hair?
like
he was just trying to like joke with her and mess around with her and stuff, and apparently she'd always just be like reading a book and just be like, and just like ignoring him, and he was like, this is just like so painful. And apparently it was like the complete opposite when he worked with like Emilia Clarke on Game of Thrones. Apparently they were like laughing and joking and all like always had their arms around each other, and there was a proper bants, and apparently he'd even like tackle her and stuff like that. I'd be like, wifey and stuff like that, and she'd just be like, you big silly oaf and that. Do you know what I mean? But it's like proper like puppy playing. But it made them have that connection and friendship, which meant that they could fake all of that. You know, just by being a good actor, because obviously that's what you're supposed to. It's your job at the end of the day. But apparently they said that it was so forced and so hard that any like good interaction that there was between Amber Heard and Jason Momoa and Aquaman 1 was like completely manufactured by the studio. They said it was purely. They said it was completely down to expert editing and zero to do with good acting.
That's crazy.
They said that like, and they said that like, you know, they're not even necessarily blaming her, you know, but
it's just the situation.
But they saying and they saying as a result, it's just like too hard, and they said it's too expensive to go to that length in a movie consistently.
Just get it right with the actors and the chemistry, and
like it's almost like the actor's job.
Yeah,
you know, it's like if you're building a rapport, like you know, and I've heard it myself before. Like, you know, if there's like a father-son relationship in a movie, then, you know, usually have
to build that kind of thing.
Yeah, you'll
spend
time with that person. You'll go
it's
like
just like people
or
like doing method acting in that, like to get to go so into the role, to play an amazing role. Like they go into the method acting and make sure they're going to bring the beans.
Yeah, well,
I know. I heard that Emilia Clarke is the one that everyone's trying to get recast.
Yeah,
for her in Aquaman.
I don't reckon she actually would do it. Well, because I don't know. I haven't heard anything from her in terms of like saying that she even would do it. Or like, I haven't heard
more of like a fan cast.
Yeah, it's definitely like a fan thing. I don't think there's actually like any like solid reports.
Maybe they should just drop all Aquaman films.
Didn't the first one tank?
I watched it and I definitely didn't like. I was just like,
I didn't think it was that good.
I heard the first one tanked.
Yeah, I remember I didn't
even tanked on my behalf.
Yeah, I didn't think it was that great. And like, you know, I'm a big fan of Jason Momoa, and I think he's a cool guy. I thought his depiction of Khal Drogo in Game of Thrones was just badass.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the series that he's in as well? What's it called? Like I
was going to say Outlander.
Yeah,
but
no, it's not Outlander. It's something like that.
James Fraser. Frontier, yeah, that was I love that one. That was. Do you know what? I've never watched it.
You know, oh man, you would love it. You need to watch it. It's all about the pelts and just and you know, like, it's all about the pelts. The pelts and like hunting over in America. It's proper
like early colonial days.
Yeah.
Well, the frontier days.
And like he's like going against all of like the American, like that they're trying to come in and take over it all, you know, and all that kind of stuff.
Isn't he like supposed to be like half Native American or something like that?
Yeah. He's got it in him.
He's got it in him.
Got it in him.
Yeah.
The end of the court date is May 27th.
Yeah.
So by the time we're here next week, it should be over.
I think because
you know who won.
They're like allocated a certain amount of hours for their case, and I can't remember what it is, like 100 hours each or something like that. And Amber Heard's already used up her time. So the remaining time is just purely, which is even worse for her point of view, because already it seems like that she's losing quite badly, and now it's almost like for whatever time is left, it's purely going to be Johnny Depp's like defense. So it's almost like all the jury and the judge are going to just be left for like days with nothing but like for the last 2 days, like nothing but like Johnny Depp's defense, which is almost like, do you know what I mean? It's like you're going to be left. They've definitely must have saved stuff for this last, like, I think they've got 7 hours left or something, like Johnny Depp's team now of like defense time. So
then after that, is it just like the judge will just make a decision?
So the jury make a decision. The judge makes the overall decision, though. I think so. Like
right.
I think that's the case.
I've never really known how politics even works with that. I know obviously you've got to get called up for jury duty, but
so you get called up for jury duty. I said I'm not 100% sure how it works in America, but I think it's basically what happens is, so like the jury make a decision,
right?
The jury decision then goes to the judge, who makes the overall decision,
right?
But the judge will usually, most of the time, go with the jury.
Favour of the jury.
Not always, and they don't have to.
Really? I thought they had to, but obviously they wouldn't
I'm not
100%.
I might be wrong. I might be wrong. Obviously, we're talking about this on the fly, so it's not like we've prepared this. So excuse us if I'm wrong or whatever.
Legal,
but I'm pretty sure that the judge has the overall say, but the jury has like massive significance.
Yeah.
So if it's like a 8 out of 10 vote. If out of like 10 people, 8 people say that this person's guilty and the other one's right, then that goes to the judge. And I mean, statistically, it's probably already more likely that the judge is going to have the same opinion as them. But then even if they're 50-50, the fact that the jury obviously are that unanimous, they're probably going to then make them,
I think what I thought was mad about the American system as well, like just from watching Power the other day, like how the way that legal bodies obtain evidence is super important in the court of law, so that if they obtain that evidence illegally, it cannot be held up in the court of law, even if it is like totally shows that the other person has murdered someone, or they can't use it. They can't use it as like, I just think that's a bit messed up. Like obviously it tries to stop people doing things in a roundabout way that wouldn't that isn't legal. But it still like means that people could just be let off for like murdering people and stuff, Do you remember that bit in Power where Tommy he goes to he goes into prison and they're trying to like lock him up, but the person that had given his face like the picture of his face was like a 14-year-old like underage kind of girl, like so they would have needed the father's permission for for her to do the the facial recognition thing. I can't remember what it's called. You know when they drew a drawing of the
I'm with you.
Yeah. So because the person obtained that without the father's permission, they couldn't use it in court, and he just got off clean. And it was like, whoa, like that's just crazy that you think. I thought evidence is evidence, but it's not unless it's obtained legally.
I think it's quite good though in a way that like but I guess like the idea is that like children can be like either manipulated or that they have big imaginations, and like as your parent, you are your child's guardian, and that unless you think 100% sure that information is accurate, it's almost like your job and your role to make sure that whatever's going into that court system is like accurate. And I guess if you didn't, it's because you would be where either it was you know your child better than anyone, so it's like it's either their imagination or for some reason they're telling porkies. So I think it is quite good in general that they have that rule. But then as you said, it's like if you were that much of a gangster, and then you could get somebody on the outside to go and put like a gun to that guy's head and be like, "Don't you dare get that picture testifying court." Then you could be like, oh, "Okay." But that's like straight up like mafia stuff, though, isn't it? That's like deep mafia stuff.
And it's even like if you obtain a recording, but you haven't had a warrant to record that person, and it says, "I am the killer," they can't use it in court, and it's just like
mad,
what? Like
all of this. I remember like my uncle was a copper, and he said that he loves like the on foot aspect of being a copper. Like he loves helping people, he loves being on foot, like he loves all that. But he said that like you would not believe how much of it is like paperwork and HR stuff. He said it's like 80% of the job
to show that it's all been done properly. That everything accountable for. And he
says like every small thing that you do will be like a fat like folder of paperwork back at the station. And he said, and it's not just that; it's all the HR, everything. It's just like mad nowadays. Whereas, like, I don't think it was so much like that, like say, like 50 years ago. But it's like as time's getting on, it's getting worse and worse. I know a lot of coppers are leaving the force because of it.
Really?
At least in this country. Obviously, I only know what my uncle says like the inside. But even that, I bumped into my uncle last week in the supermarket, and he was already chatting to another chap. And then my uncle Dom introduced me to him, and he was like an ex copper that used to work with my uncle Dom. And he was saying that, like, and I was like, oh, you're a copper, are you? And he was like, oh, not anymore. He was like, I packed it in a couple of years ago because he was like, it's just like ridiculous now. He was just saying like the paperwork and the HR is just ridiculous. So I was like, oh man.
Yeah, it's got to be a balance, hasn't there, between like regulations and like, you know, if you step too far out of that, it'll become like too crazy. But then actually being able to get things done. Like even when I remember like working at Hinckley, and that was like a nuclear power station, but the time it took to do anything, like to move a bit of soil from here to here, it was the same thing. It was like something that my dad would say to me, like, because he was in the Navy and he was an engineer in the Navy, and he said if anything went wrong with the ship in the Navy, like they would get it sorted like that. You know, they would have to, because they were, you know, that was, and so he said he was used to that, but then going into the environment of a nuclear and a power station, like there was something that needed to get done, and it was like that, like we need to get this sorted, but they couldn't because they had so many things to process this to step through and everything. It's like, it was so annoying.
I hate faff.
Yeah,
I think I would do more stuff in life if it wasn't for the faff. Like I don't want to go through, I don't want to do like a six month to a year course to get a qualification every time I want to like turn my hand at something for a bit. Do you know what I mean? And I like the idea, you know, that if you show in a little bit of like talent in something, then that's just sort of like quite black and white, and that you should be able to just
learn
sort of
on
like,
the job.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Because there's no substitute for experience anyway.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? So
experience.
It's like, it's so frustrating, isn't it? You know, I mean, there were times when I was younger that, like, you know, I'm sure like for like just a bit of extra money, like you know, I'd have probably done like some more like just like labouring and like building stuff and that, but you have to get like little certificates and stuff like that. So it's like, well, I'm not going to go.
So much.
I don't want to like pursue it as a career.
Yeah.
But I know like on site I'd be handy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
So
it's
yeah,
like,
tell you. Or even someone like our mate Nicky C. Like I've been talking to him about it. Like there's loads of opportunities at like Hinckley and stuff, and for electricians and everything. And he's been working in this electrician job for so long. He's like so knowledgeable about circuit boards and all this stuff. But because he's been doing that experience on the job without any qualifications in it, he's just totally closed off to all of these job opportunities.
Yeah.
But he's probably got more opportunities.
He's probably
got more experience than a lot of people that would be going in fresh out of college.
And he probably would be doing a much better job as well. But it's just because of that small
gotta
technicality.
tick the box, man.
Don't you think when you come to things like that, that makes you just almost realise how ridiculous society is? Well, like some aspects of society
are. Like, I see, because I was thinking
you could
about
be the best at a job, and just because you haven't got a piece of paper, someone way worse.
Because you go right down the other end of it, and it's like if there weren't traffic lights, or if what you didn't have to drive on the left side of the road, you could drive on either side. Do you know what I mean? It's like where you draw the line with it, and like somewhere, because I've been researching all the Bitcoin stuff and everything, and like the whole of cryptocurrency is unregulated, so it's not regulated by any financial authorities and stuff, which it makes it like really volatile, and people don't trust it and stuff like that. So this guy was talking about, and he was like, he wants it to be regulated because that would bring more like trust to it, because when you do have to be held accountable and like audited and stuff like that, or it's like or accountancy, like being a chartered accountant, you gotta because you've got that chartered thing, you're accountable for any mistakes that you make, and you could actually get prosecuted. So it's like that gives people more trust in your thing, but it's like a balance, isn't it? Like you don't want it to go too far, because it means things don't get done.
Yeah, I think that you should have that common sense aspect. I mean, I guess like in a way, say you never met somebody before, right? If they have a qualification or like a degree in something, whatever, like you that's almost like peace of mind immediately. If say you're hiring somebody, it's like, okay, you know that they're going to know a certain amount as it is. But I also think that if you know somebody personally and you know that they're great at the job, or even if you don't know them personally and they can demonstrate that they're the best at the job, I think that they should get the job.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, man.
Doesn't mean I would like want to be like operated, but have a brain operation and by some guy that's not even got a degree in like, doctoring, obviously, because it's nice to think like, oh, okay, this guy's clearly very well learned on this like stuff, you know, like clued up. But I think at the same time, you know, if you're the best at something, you're the best at something. You know? And that speaks for itself, you know,
for sure.
Yeah, man. That's it.
So it's weird. I was just thinking about you were saying about the frontier and stuff like that, like going back to that Jason Momoa show, like actually how crazy it would have been, like for say like all the Native Americans. Like imagine what it was like when all of the like ships just started turning up and all of these like white people were just coming off, and how differently dressed they were, and like imagine those massive Navy vessels with like cannons all coming out the side and like massive flags and like just like the clothes everyone would be wearing, like brooches and just like all these like different coloured garments and all having guns. Like that's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like when you don't know something, it's like magic. Like we talked about that before, and for them it must have just been like, whoa, like who are these new?
All those days of colonialism, like all of those first tribes. Like obviously, there are some small tribes like in the world nowadays, like at some places in the Amazon, some other little places in the world as well, where there still are like nomadic, almost like hunter-gatherer tribes that basically like know nothing about the outside world, which is crazy to us. I mean, for anybody that's like listening to us, whether it's on like YouTube or Spotify or the radio, like, let's face it, like the world seems, in some ways, we're so connected now. We could speak to somebody from Indonesia on like the internet in like 2 seconds, or like China, United States, it doesn't matter where, you know what I mean? Africa. But to think that like, there are these small, like pockets of like civilizations, that are like
that almost live in the past.
Yeah, and to think that, as I said, all of those ancient civilizations that since the dawn of time, as far as they were aware, they were almost just like on their own because they never developed like massive ships to go traveling right across the seas. They might have they had like little fishing boats, or whatever, that would go out like 50 foot, and then they would like hunt fish and stuff. But other than that, they'd be like keeping to themselves. But anyway, I recently came across this, and I thought this would be a really cool thing to talk about on the pod. This is an account from a book called The Ancient History of the Maori, Volume 5. And what this is a translation of what was written down by a Maori tribe about the first time that the British ever came to New Zealand.
Whoa!
So at this time, the Maori had no knowledge at all of white people. They'd never met a white person. They were indigenous native tribes to New Zealand, and they had a very unique lifestyle. If you think about that Maori culture nowadays, if you think about like, if for any rugby fans out there, like New Zealand rugby team, they do the haka, and they're big on like their tattoos and they're like their warrior culture. But they were like nowhere near as advanced as Britain at the time. Obviously, Britain had like it was still like a religious country, but it had like quite advanced science, at least relatively to the rest of the world at the time. It had like advanced science, maths, poetry, philosophy, literature, writing, advanced weaponry. Do you know what I mean? Guns, as I said, those massive cannons on the ships, like amazing ships, amazing navy, all this stuff, like traded all across the world. And then for these Maori people to first meet the British, this is just, I thought this account was absolutely fascinating. So this, as I said, this is translated from Maori scripture, and this is from the point of view of a Maori man that was writing about when his account of when he was a little boy, of when the British first came. So he says, "In the days long past, when I was a very little boy, a vessel came to Whitianga. Our tribe was living there at the time. We did not live there as a permanent home, but we were there according to our custom of living for some time on each of our plots of lands, to keep our claim to each of them, and that our fire might be kept alight on each plot, so that it might not be taken from us by some other tribe. We lived at Whitianga, and a vessel came there, and when our old men saw the ship, they said it was Tapua, a god, and the people on board were strange beings. The ship came to anchor, and the boats pulled on shore. As our wise men looked at the manner in which they came on shore, with the rowers pulling with their backs to the bows of the boat, the old people said, 'Yes, it is so. These people are goblins.' Their eyes are on the back of their heads, and they pull on shore with their backs to the land to which they are going. When these goblins came on shore, we, the children and women, took notice of them, but we ran away into the forest, and the warriors alone stayed in the presence of these goblins. But as the goblins stayed some time, and did not do any evil to our braves, we came back one by one, and gazed at them, and we stroked their garments with our hands, and we were pleased with the whiteness of their skins, and with the blue eyes of some of them. These goblins began to gather oysters, and we gave them some kumara, fish, and fern root to them. These they accepted, and we began to roast cockles for them. And we saw that these goblins were eating the fish and cockles. We were startled and said, "Perhaps these are not goblins like the Maori goblins." These goblins went into the forest and also climbed up the hill to our pa at Wataanga. They collected grasses from the cliffs and kept knocking at the stones on the beach, and we said, "Why are these acts done by these goblins?" We and the women gathered stones and grass of all sorts and gave to these goblins. Some of the stones they liked and put them into their bags. The rest they threw away. And when we gave them the grass and branches of trees, they stood and talked to us, or they uttered the words of their strange language. Perhaps they were asking questions, and as we did not know their language, we just laughed. And these goblins laughed also, so we were pleased. The warriors and old men of our tribe sat in silence and gazed at these goblins. So these goblins ate the food we had presented to them, with some relish they had brought on shore with them, and then we went up to the Wataanga River with them. Now some of the goblins had strange walking sticks which they carried about with them, and when we arrived at the bare dead trees where the shags roost at night and have their nests, the goblins lifted up their walking sticks and pointed them at the birds, and in a short time thunder was heard crashing, and there was a flash of lightning to be seen, and a shag fell from the trees, and we children were terrified and fled, and rushed into the forest, and left the goblins alone. The goblins laughed, and waved their hands to us, and in a short time the bravest of us went back to where the goblins were, and handled the bird, and saw that it was dead. But what had killed it? Our old people waited in suspicion, and went back to the settlement, as also did the goblins. We were now at quiet and peace with them, and they gave us some of the food that they had brought on shore with them from their strange land. Some of this food was very hard, but it was also very sweet. Some of our old people said it was punga punga, from the land which these goblins came from. They gave us some fat food, which the same old people of our tribe said was the flesh of whales, but the saltiness of this food nipped our throats, and we did not care for this fat food. After the ship had been lying at anchor some time. So just to say, obviously, like, salt is like a preservative, isn't it? And before the days of like refrigerators, people used to keep food safe by putting lots of salt on it. They probably didn't even do that. They probably just ate everything fresh. So they probably just try like fully salted meats and everything. They were probably like overwhelming to them.
I heard of something about salt as well, that it's not super like a mineral that's like would have been super available to us all of the time, so that when we do have salt, our bodies would like, oh no, I might be talking about sugar, sorry.
Oh really?
Maybe salt or sugar.
I know that it was very wealthy. That's why they're saying worth its weight in salt.
Yeah.
So in ancient cultures, salt was so...
It was something about the way our body holds onto it,
right?
And it holds onto it a lot because it's not as in nature all of the time. So I think it might be salt, and it's like our body will store it in a way that's like. Now we have a lot more of it, so it shouldn't be stored as it is. If you know what I mean, and it's you get too much. Yeah,
I know historically salt was considered like extremely valuable. In some cultures, at certain points in history, would value it as highly as gold. So like a pound of salt would be worth the same amount as like a pound of gold.
Wasn't tea like that as well?
Yeah, I think in some points like really in Britain's history, I think that's where obviously like the tea wars, like the Americans nowadays take the mick of us about like how much.
Tea Party?
There was the Boston Tea Party. I don't know. I don't know if it was that period that tea was as valuable as gold to the Brits. Right. But yeah, no, that's definitely why we're associated with loving tea so much. Anyway, getting back to this Maori lad's account. After the ship had been lying at anchor some time, some of our warriors went aboard and saw many things there. When they came on shore, they gave our people an account of what they had seen. This made many of us desirous to go and see the home of the goblins. I went with the others, but I was very little fellow in those days, so some of us boys went in the company of the warriors. Some of my playmates were afraid and stayed on the shore. When we got on board the ship, we were welcomed by the goblins, whom our warriors answered in our language. We sat on the deck of the ship, where we were looked at by the goblins, who with their hands stroked our cloaks and the hair on the heads of us children. At the same time, they made much gabbling noise and talking, which we thought was questions regarding our cloaks, and the shark's teeth which we wore around our ears, and the hai tiki we wore suspended on our chests. But as we could not understand them, we just laughed. and they laughed also. I love those little interactions.
Yeah.
So we laughed, and they laughed also. And how it's like, and we were pleased. It's like so funny, you know. They held up some garments and showed them to us, touching ours at the same time. So we gave our cloaks for their cloaks, to which some of our warriors said, Kapai, which words were repeated by some of the goblins, at which we all laughed, and we were joined in laughter by the goblins. There was one supreme man on the ship. We knew that he was the lord of the whole by his perfect gentlemanly and noble demeanour. He seldom spoke, but some of the goblins spoke much. But this man did not utter many words at all. All that he did was to handle our cloaks and hold our spears and wahaki and touch the hair of our heads. He was a very good man and came to us, the children, and patted our little cheeks and gently touched our heads. His language was a strange hissing sound to us, and the words he spoke were not understood by us in the least. We had not been long on board the ship before this lord of the goblins made a speech, and took some charcoal and made marks on the deck of the ship, and pointed to the shore and looked at our warriors. One of our middle-aged men said to our people, He is asking for an outline of the land, and that old man stood up, took the charcoal, and marked the outline of the Ti Ika Amawi, and the old chief spoke to the chief goblin, and explained the chart he had drawn. The other goblins and our people sat still and looked at the two were engaged with the chart marked with the charcoal on the deck. After some time the chief goblin took some white stuff, on which he made a copy of what the old chief had made on the deck. It's obviously paper.
Yeah.
But they would have never have seen paper before. Isn't that crazy? It's so funny. It's like, took some white stuff.
I'm loving hearing about how they're like interacting back in this time, even when they couldn't like. There was no way to get out. You can't get up Google Translate then. You know what I mean? But still managing to get around it and be like, right, we need a layout of your land.
Oh, I know. It's so
cool.
fascinating. It almost makes me think like in those days to be in like the British Navy must have been fascinating.
Yeah.
Like imagine for like being one of these British sailors that have now met this culture for the first time ever, and you're sort of gauging each other like, okay, one of us going to attack the other one, and it's like. No, it's cool.
This like encounter seems like quite friendly and stuff. Rather,
that's one of the things I liked.
Yeah, that normally you just hear it. It's like you go over decimate the whole culture.
Yeah, I think people can be so negative sometimes and only focus on like the bad aspects of history. But like from this account, and this is from the horse's mouth. This is from this is from a traditional Maori fellow. He's saying, you know,
his first interaction was
how kind
very positive and
the captain of the ship was, or like the lord of the goblins, as he says. But like saying like all of the people were nice and they were like exchanging garments. And the British were clearly fascinated by the shark's teeth, probably like shark species that were like nowhere like near Britain, so they were probably fascinated by them, like what weird beasts are these? And then in exchange they were giving them stuff. It all seems very like nice and positive.
Just shows how universal laughter is as well.
Yeah,
like I'm loving the little bits of like they laughed, we laughed, we were happy,
and that's something about communication as well. Like language is the main form of communication that we've like got better at. But
emotion,
is
another form of
that emotion is what connects us, and you can find that commonality and that connection in anyone, no matter if you even speak their language. I remember my dad would always say that in Russia he'd go out drinking, he'd go fishing with this guy, and he didn't speak a word of English, and he didn't speak a word of Russian, but they drink that bottle of vodka, and they would be like communicating with each other all night, and it's like
when the Maori like guy is saying, you know, and then like the goblins came and they would stroke our hair and pat our cheeks. It's like you can imagine, you know, going up to a kid and like sort of patting them on the head like good lad or like good lass. Do you know what I mean? And it's like as long as you're sort of smiling and being physically open and not acting shady and acting warm, like, oh, you know, like come try our food. And then it's like, oh, you got some food too, let's try that. It's like that's showing that really nice aspect of humanity. And because laughter is universal, it's like we get tickled. Things tickle us. Do you know what I mean? And it's like sometimes you could imagine that experience in a way as amazing as it would have been, and almost like as awe-inspiring as it would have been. It would have also been like a bit funny.
Yeah, like real funny.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
totally. These people that they're calling
very
goblins.
Humorous.
Yeah, they're like saying that they were fascinated by the whiteness of their skin and the blue of the eyes and all this stuff. It's like so funny, you know. And you can imagine it would almost be a bit funny, like how different the culture was. Anyway, where was I?
Paper.
I said about the paper, didn't I? Yeah, that's it. And the chief took out some white stuff on which he made a copy of what the old chief had made on the deck, and then spoke to the old chief. The old chief explained the situation of the Rayanga. the North Cape. But as the goblin chief did not appear to understand, the old chief lay down on the deck as if dead, and then pointed to the reinga as drawn by him in the plan. But the goblin chief turned and spoke to his companions, and after they had talked for some time, they all looked at the map which the old chief had drawn on the deck. But the goblins did not appear to understand anything about the world of the spirits spoken by our old chief, so they scattered about the deck of their ship. That's quite interesting, isn't it? It's almost like they obviously, to the natives, to the Maori people, this the reinga was obviously clearly like a forbidden land which they thought was inhabited by spirits. But obviously, like trying to explain that in like a different language to somebody, you'd just be like, "What?" Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's quite interesting, isn't it? I and my 2 boy companions did not walk about on board of the ship. We were afraid lest we should be bewitched by the goblins, so we sat still and looked at everything we saw at the home of these goblins. When the chief goblin had been away in that part of their ship which he occupied, he came up on deck again and came to where I and my 2 boy companions were, and he patted our heads with his hands, and he put his hand out towards me and spoke to us at the same time, holding a nail out towards us. My companions were afraid and sat in silence, but I laughed and he gave the nail to me. I took it into my hand and said, "Kapai," very good, and he repeated my words and again patted our heads with his hand, and he went away. My companion said, "This must be the leader of the ship," which is proved by his kindness to us. And also, he is very fond of us children. That's so nice, isn't it? It's almost like a nice little interaction.
Yeah.
I was pleased.
I almost think like nowadays, I almost think like the way the media would depict like some like British captain from these days would almost be this like this really like almost like obnoxious, pompous man. He just seems like really kind in that. A noble man, one of noble birth, cannot be lost in a crowd. I took my nail and kept it with great care, and carried it with me wherever I went, and made it fit to the point of my spear, and also used it to make holes in the sideboards of canoes to bind them onto the canoe. I kept this nail to this day, until she was capsized in the sea, and my God, it was lost to me. That's a bit sad, isn't it?
So I'm assuming they would have never seen like a nail or something before.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, or like something like that. I expect they had their own sort of binding tools that would have been completely different.
Probably not metal as well, didn't like a lot of tribes would use like
I think they used like bones and
and what's the black the like
obsidian.
Obsidian,
I don't think the Maori used obsidian. That was more like South America. But I think they used things like they would make weapons out of like sharks' teeth. They would like hunt sharks and then make like attach the sharks' teeth to like clubs and stuff to make like brutal weapons.
Crazy.
The goblin chief took some of his own things and went with them to our old chief and gave them 2 handfuls of what we now know were potatoes. At that time we thought they were parareka, and we called them by this name, as the things he gave to the old man were not unlike the bulb of our parareka, or the lower end of that fern, at the part where it holds to the stem of the fern tree. Our old chief took the gift and planted it, and we have partaken of potatoes every year since that time.
Wow.
That's pretty cool.
That
cool. Guy just like single-handedly just made potatoes a thing. And let's face it, we all know how good potatoes are. I bet they were well chuffed about the potatoes. I know I would be. I'd be like, I love potato, mate.
Yeah,
you
just doubled the enjoyment in my life.
Yeah. I'm gonna leave it there for a second. There's still a bit more of the story to go, but we'll listen to a track now, and when we come back, I'll tell you the rest of the tale of this account of this Maori guy meeting the British for the very first time ever when he was a small lad.
So cool.
So good.
It's so good, and it's so interesting. That's why I thought it'd be really cool to share it on the pod. This is A Million Miles Away by Zach Wild. We'll be back after this. Yeah, such a cool story, this, isn't it?
Man, I'm loving this. I'm actually,
It's like such a cool story time, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm just enjoying just hearing like the account. I
found some other ones as well, and there's a really good one of the first time that the Greenlanders first ever met the British as well.
From Greenland.
Yeah, like Eskimos essentially.
Oh, nice.
It's the first on the Eskimos, and it's it's hilarious. There's this bit during it. I'll tell you it all properly like next week or whatever.
Yeah.
But there's this one bit during it which is hilarious where it's like the British were trying to discern from the Eskimos like what they thought of as deities or what they worshipped, and it was like the British were discerning that the Eskimos didn't worship the sun or the moon, which was like a common thing in lots of cultures that they had met, and they didn't seem to worship any deity. And then it's just this hilarious exchange suddenly where it was like, and then when the white man explained that there is one God and that he has made everything, the Eskimo freaked out and acted scared and then ran away. And then when they went over to him, like, what's wrong? He was just like, where is he? It's just this like hilarious interaction.
But
like,
where is he?
Just almost like, imagine like, what? There's this fucking weird, powerful man that just that's just made and does everything.
Yeah,
like fucking
that's
hell.
such a hard thing to. Religion is such a hard thing to explain to someone that you can't like actually explain to.
It's almost like making out that like the Eskimos almost just didn't have any concept of religion. That to them it was almost like they were very like nature based.
Yeah,
they didn't even worship the sun or the moon like some.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? Like a lot of deity, a lot of cultures will worship the sun or the moon.
Yeah, I thought every culture did in some way something.
I thought religion was just like a human concept.
They just didn't see it as like sacred. Do you know what I mean? They were just obviously they sort of knew what it was for. They just like, when the sun's up, it's daytime. And
so did they have any at all? No, just
I don't think they had any.
No.
I suppose they would have had like
crazy.
stories and stuff, but they would have just seen them as like stories rather than like
during the account
worship.
I remember it said like during the account that like the only really myths that they had was that they originally came from people that lived even further north. And apparently the British discerned that was probably actually the case, and that actually probably was true because they had already met an indigenous tribe that lived something like 200 miles north of this settlement, but they hadn't even come across each other in something like 600 years.
Yeah,
but their language apparently was like fairly similar. Like it wasn't the same, but it was fairly similar.
This whole thing feels like exactly. I could picture this, but swap out like Maori tribe and like British people, and just put us and aliens.
Yeah,
and I can picture like that interaction still happening. Them coming down and be like,
well, that's the thing. This is one of the reasons why I think it's almost like fascinating, because it's like that's what it would have seemed like to them.
Exactly.
To them, like the English would have essentially been aliens. And I know back in the day, people actually would use the word alien to describe anybody like not of your land.
Yeah.
So like for all intents and purposes, the English in this story are aliens, which is hilarious because I'm talking about people that are literally us.
We are the aliens.
Mental. The goblins.
Yeah. That was Losing It by Rush. God bless Rush. Before that was I'm Shipping Up to Boston by the Dropkick Murphys. We were just telling the tale of a Maori account of the first time ever meeting people that weren't indigenous to what we now know as New Zealand. So the first time that a British ship ever came aboard, and the interaction between the traditional Maori tribes and the British people. One thing that's a really nice thing to take away from it is actually how positive this whole encounter seems. We left off just before those tracks with that the captain of the British vessel gave potatoes to the Maori tribes. They obviously had never ever seen a potato before. I mean, potatoes aren't even native to the UK, so obviously, but we all know how good potatoes are, and I was just saying, I bet that was amazing for them. I bet when they actually first tried it for the first time, we were like, man, imagine that first time that they had like figured out to like boil some potatoes and then like fried them or something.
Yeah.
Oh, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like think about
So
like
simple,
how
so
nice that
good.
is. Like just boil like some potatoes and then like slice them up and make potato wedges or something, and just coat them in some oil and then fry them. That's like just that is like amazing. So they patented potatoes for the first time. These potatoes were first planted at a place in the Warau called the Hanua, halfway between Drury and the Tapau settlement, east of the entrance of the river Warawa, opposite the island of the Waheki. And the old chief to whom the potatoes were given was the Ngatipu tribe, who occupied the Drury district at that time. After these parareka had been planted for 3 years, and there was a good quantity of them, a feast was given, at which some of the potatoes were eaten, and then a general distribution of seed, parareka, was made amongst the tribes of the Wakato and Haraki. The Pui tribes say they had the potato before any other tribes of New Zealand. This assertion is a fiction. We, the tribes of the Thames, first had potatoes, as we can show that even at this day the potato grows of its own accord in the Hanua district, from the fact that in the days of old the pa at the Hanua was attacked by a war party, and the pa was taken, and all the people killed and eaten, and their bones were broken and knocked like nails into the posts of the storehouses at their own home, and the place was sacred for a long time, not anyone daring to go there, and was quite forsaken for many years. But potatoes continue to grow there of their own accord on the banks of the streams, where the soil is carried out by the freshes in the creeks, and potatoes are to be obtained there to this day. Pretty brutal account also of like a rival tribe just coming and killing everyone. The fact that it says,
eating them.
Yeah, it literally says like that Hanua was attacked by a war party, the Pa, which obviously must mean potato.
Yeah.
The potatoes were taken. All the people were killed and eaten, their bones were broken and knocked like nails into the posts of the storehouses at their own home. And then obviously when it goes on to say the place was sacred for a long time after that, they must have thought it was like a haunted place.
Yeah.
But apparently, it shows that's where crazy. The potatoes first came from, because potatoes were just growing like crazy. I guess when they eventually thought it was safe to go back, like there wouldn't be any spirits there, they just went back and there was just loads of potats. Consolation. One of our tribe was killed by the goblins who first came to the Watayanga. So there is one account, one of the Maori were killed by the British. But it does explain it. We, that is, our people, went again and again to that ship to sell fish, or cloaks, or anything that we Maori had to sell. And one day, one of our canoes, in which were 9 persons, paddled off to the ship. But one of that 9 Maori that went out on the ship was a noted thief in our tribe. And this man took a dogskin cloak to sell to the goblins. There were 5 of them at the stern of the canoe, and 4 in the bow. And this thief was with those in the stern. When they got alongside the great ship of the goblins, the goblin who collected shells, flowers, tree blossoms and stones was looking over the side of the vessel. He held up the end of the garment which he would give in exchange for the dogskin cloak belonging to this noted thief. So the thief waved with his hand to the goblin to let some of it down into the canoe, which the goblin obliged. And as the goblin let some of it down into the canoe, the thief kept pulling it towards him. When the thief had got a long length of the goblin's garment before him, the goblin cut his garment and beckoned with his hand to the man to give the dogskin cloak up to him. But the thief did not utter a word, and began to fold up the dogskin cloak with the goblin's garment into one massive bundle, and took his companions to paddle away to the shore. They did paddle away. The goblin briefly went down into the hold of the ship, but soon came up with one of their walking sticks in hand, and pointed it at the canoe which was paddling away. Thunder pealed and lightning flashed in the skies, but those in the canoe simply paddled on. When they landed, 8 rose to leave the canoe, but the thief sat still with his dogskin mat and garment of the goblin under his feet. His companions called to him, but he did not answer. One of them went and shook him, but then the thief fell back into the hold of the canoe, and blood was seen on his clothing, and a hole was in his back. He was carried to the settlement, and a meeting of the people called to consult on the matter, at which his companions told the tale of the theft of the goblin's garment. And our wise people said, he was the cause of his own death, and it would not be right to avenge him. All the payment he will obtain for his death will be the goblin's garment, which he has stolen, which shall be left to bind around his body where it is now laid.
It's intense, man.
That is intense, isn't it? Fair play, though. I think
what a shot.
Yeah. Well, I think, let's face it, like these people, they were in the British military, and like that was one of the best armies in the world at the time. Like these, they weren't exactly like, this wasn't like a dad's army. This was like if you were
you cheeky little
if you were one of the ones that was like picked also right to be on these ships, you were probably like a very good soldier. Like Navy personnel, whatever you want to describe it as, but
especially to go all that way.
Yeah, and also it would have been super cheeky. Like obviously, it sounds like the British are being very reasonable. So it's like this guy's like,
and even like
you're not going to tolerate
it down,
like theft.
Totally.
And obviously back in those days, it was just like capital punishment. Like boom. There's no like going ashore, and it's just like, and it's interesting. Like obviously the Maori people would like realise,
and they said he was a known thief, and everyone corroborated the
fact they said
story.
He was the cause of his own death, and it would not be right to avenge him. That's so intense. It's like all the payment he will obtain for his death will be the goblin's garment, which he has stolen, which shall be left to bind around his body where it is laid. It's almost like he can have the cloak. We're going to wrap him up in it and leave him where he died.
Was it worth it?
Yeah, it's almost like almost like a good moral tale to all the rest of the people around as well, isn't it? It's like if you want to be greedy, that's your fate. You can have whatever you've stolen, You can have it as you're cold and dead, lying there. You know, like how good is that? You know, it's not going to do you any good. You know. Yeah. So his body was taken and put into one of the ancient cave burial places. Not any evil came from his death, and we went again to barter with the goblins of that ship, and the goblins came again and again on the shore. Nor was there one evil word ever spoken, or any act of transgression on our part for that death. And that is the tale of when that Maori lad first ever meeting the British in modern day New Zealand. That is amazing, cool. Isn't it? Yeah. That is amazing. Let me just try and get at the actual date, just to give you guys the accurate information of that.
Like I was saying in the break, that it's like if we were to meet aliens now.
Oh yeah,
Like the complete lack of being able to communicate. But
I wouldn't mind getting my teeth tickled by an alien.
Yeah, get your
patting your head
rubbed.
Yeah,
I think as well. Like,
head pat.
if you think about like Maoris, they're almost like the same as sort of like African, indigenous African people. They've got like quite like big, like bushy hair, haven't they? And like obviously like you know, most people sort of like in Europe have like not saying everyone has like straight hair. Obviously you've got like very bushy curly hair, but it's still a bit different, isn't it? You know, it's almost like it almost like feels different. Like so it would have been, I can imagine, quite fascinating, you know. So that as I said, that account was from the Ancient History of the Maori, Volume 5, pages 121 to 128, if anybody wants to go read that for themselves. And it actually the interaction took place in 1852. So if you think about it, it's not even that long ago.
Yeah.
It's less than 200 years ago.
I was going to say, I would have thought it would have been a bit earlier than that.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
It's like 170 years ago.
Mental.
Which is mad to think that just 170 years... Like, I think, you know, we think of ourselves as being so advanced, and in some ways we are. But think, just 170 years ago, the Maori had never met a white person before. You know, like the indigenous tribes of New Zealand. Pretty fascinating to think that, really.
Evolution in humans has been so fast, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Over the past like couple hundred years, it's ridiculous.
Even like in the last like 50 years.
Yeah.
You know, crazy.
Yeah,
I think obviously it was like when our parents would have been like small that the moon landing happened, and then you know like since then think of what's happened. Like, do you know what I mean? I mean, just when we were little kids, Drew, I remember like when Channel 5 came out in the UK, that was like a big deal. So at the time we had 4 channels. Yeah. And I remember it was almost like, oh my God, there's going to be a 5th channel, Channel 5.
Isn't it crazy how quickly that can be funny?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like now, when we're thinking like Netflix and all that, you can just pick whatever you want. And
then it was quite like a rapid thing after that, they weren't? Because I remember it being a big deal that Channel 5 was coming out. But then literally within like a year or two, I remember it was suddenly like, you would started hearing this whisperings of like Sky. And then I remember my dad got the first Sky, and at the time it wasn't like 1,000 channels, it was like, I think it was like 200 channels. I remember there was like Sky, what was it, Sky Plus One, I think it was like Sky Gold. I remember I used to watch things like Hercules, The Legendary Journeys with Kevin Sorbo and Xena Warrior Princess that had Lucy Lawless in. You know that woman, she was also in Spartacus, Blood and Sand, if any of you watched that. She played like the Domina. It was Domina, wasn't it? You know, anyway, like she was like the head woman anyway. But all those like old school like 90s sort of like programs and stuff. And then before you know it, and then like a few years after that, then there was like Sky Plus, and that's when it was like the first one that had like 1,000 channels. And nowadays you can just get like Freeview and crazy stuff.
It's crazy to think
it evolved quickly. About
100 years ago, just over 100 years ago, there weren't even like commercial planes. Like at all, so you couldn't even like we could, unless you were like going on a boat to somewhere. Yeah, you'd have to. We couldn't travel like we can now
at the speed that we can travel.
Yeah,
now.
It's funny though. I was thinking just the other day actually. In some ways, you can say from the whole COVID situation how in a way that's actually almost like badly unnatural. Like if the whole COVID situation had happened, say, and it wasn't for commercial flights, it probably would have never even made its way to the UK or any other country. But you know, it'd have probably stayed in Asia.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But because there's just flights in and out of Beijing and other places.
You go, world.
It's like I wonder how many people. Be interesting to look that up. Actually, let's find that out. How many people travel from the UK to China or from China to the UK every day? Do you know what I mean? Because think if you said now, I'm going to go to China by like just by any means possible. So you probably have to get like a boat over to France, and then you could probably go by like horse and cart to like, you know, through Europe, through like Russia,
but
that would take you so long, you know. Say that would definitely be the way to do it, wouldn't it? Would just be go to like Europe and then go by go by like horse or whatever. If, you know, I'm obviously talking like back in the day, like, you know, before any other like trains or anything like that. But I think about how long that would take you. I mean, I know obviously the Romans used to travel as far as Asia on what was known as the Silk Road.
I was
to, like,
just about to
trade.
say the Silk Road,
But they never went deep into Asia. You know, no. They would go to like the outskirts of Asia, trade with the Chinese. And they would trade stuff they would trade stuff back and forth that neither culture had, and then they would go back to Europe essentially.
So they still didn't really get to explore it all.
Well, no, they didn't. But it's like the thing is, imagine how long it would have taken them to get there anyway. I expect they would wanted to get home by the time they got there.
Yeah, because it's like years, isn't it? Like I remember, I think it was in Marco Polo when I was watching it and it was about the Silk Road, and it was like when his dad would come back to Vienna, it would have been years since he'd been away, but that was just one trip along the Silk Road, you know.
Well, think like if you like get up a map of the world and then like put your finger on like Italy, and then like look at where China is, and then think maybe like look up how many miles it is from Italy to China, and then imagine how long it takes you to say drive 100 miles in a car, and then imagine how long it would take to walk or even on horseback. But let's face it, even if it was on horseback, you're not like galloping the horse like full sprint the whole time, because the horse would die. You know, you would probably just be chilling on the horse as it was walking at its normal pace. So think about how long it would take you to get that far.
Yeah.
Did you find that little...
I couldn't find the stat.
You couldn't find the stat?
No.
Look up how many...
Chinese tourists took a record 883,000 trips to the UK in 2019. But that's the best sort of stat.
Yeah, well, even that alone, say, imagine if like just 1% of those people had a contagious virus.
Yeah.
And imagine all it would take is for them just to give it to one person in the UK while they were there, and then that's going to slowly start spreading to the UK population, and then
vice versa.
And then think about commuting nowadays. The amount of people that say would like live in London but would like work in say Bristol or I don't know, just wherever. And then before you know it, I mean, it's almost like bound to just spread around the country. But
then I guess you can say the benefit is the amount of culture that's spread, and you know, all technology that's been able to spread through the world. Sure. It's definitely interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
I couldn't imagine a world where you couldn't go to just get up and go to somewhere though. That seems so mind-boggling to me now.
That
there was a time you wouldn't even have knowledge of these other places.
Yeah. It's 4,701 miles from Rome to the outskirts of China.
Whoa.
It's quite far, isn't it?
Yeah, imagine that to go by that on like, as I said, like horse and cart or something, or maybe even like by foot. That's an epic journey, isn't it? Yeah. How long would it take to walk that? I want to say like how long would it take to walk from Rome to China? Let's have a look at that. How long?
Take your guess.
Put Rome to China in Google Maps and then just put walk.
Yeah. From Rome to China.
And you said it would take years to make this journey.
Let's see. Well, it took Marco Polo approximately 3.5 years to travel from Venice to Kublai Khan's palace, which is in modern day Beijing. And that was about 5,000 miles. So it took Marco Polo 3.5 years to travel 5,000 miles.
I guess they would have stopped at places in between and
you'd have
traded all along the route and everything.
But they were like big journeys, weren't they? Like
yeah. Still, that is mental. 3.5 years.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Can you imagine if to get to China, the plane ride was 3.5 years long?
I remember my friend saying when I was working at Hinckley, like his girlfriend didn't like fly in. But they wanted to go to Australia, so they had to go on a ship, and it took them 3 months. Rather than because it's a massive flight, isn't it?
Was it like a nice ship at least?
I guess so. Yeah, I guess so. I think it might have been like a cruise liner or something. But they had to go by ship, and it was a 3-month journey just to get from the UK to Australia via ship.
Yeah. That's mental.
I suppose that would have been the fastest before planes.
Yeah,
boat.
Boat.
The thing is, it depends like where you were going though. Some places it wouldn't really be like plausible to go to by ship. Do you know what I mean? Like say, as I said, or like it would be really annoying. Say if you wanted to go to China by boat, and say you were going from the UK, quite an awkward place to get to, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like you'd either have to go from like the frozen north, like above Norway and stuff, but that's dangerous and dodgy because it would be freezing cold. And what if you just came across like solid ice or something, and then your ship could get stuck, and then you could all get like frozen to death. Either that, or you have to go all the way down south, across the down below the edge of Africa. It would take ages to sail that far south, and then go like under Africa, under modern day South Africa, and go that way. It's quite annoying, isn't it? The only other option, obviously, is going like an even longer route would be going across the Atlantic and then going under or over. So either going over Canada, which would, as I said, yet again, same problems as going like over Norway, be freezing, or going under South America, which again would take ages, and then you'd have to go all around the like outside of South America into the Pacific Ocean and then go that way. So it wouldn't exactly be like
I'm impressed
annoying.
on your knowledge of the seas and the lands.
Yeah, I can picture sort of like the map of the Earth in my head.
Oh, that's cool, man. I can.
Can you not?
Not really.
Can you
No,
not?
not like that. No.
Oh, right. That was quite cool. Just while I was like looking up actually how long it would take to walk from Rome to China, I've just like underneath it was this interesting article which piqued my interest. So I'll tell it to you guys. And this is it's just this article that says how much did ancient Rome and China know about each other. And then it goes on to say a Chinese research team first found a remote village near the Gobi Desert called Liqian, with villagers who had Caucasian-like physical traits, even though they were in the heart of Asia. Favourite games of theirs were things like bullfighting and traditional burials facing westward, which were not shared at all by any neighbouring villages. Then, in 2003, 99 tombs of male tall skeletons facing westwards were found near the Liqian village, dating back to the Han dynasty, which is from 206 BC to 220 AD. According to this archaeologist, all male tombs were army soldiers. In fact, Liqian 2,000 years ago was a military fortress, and the size of the skeletons are not the size of Han Chinese skeletons of this time. A genetic testing in 2005 revealed that 56% of the DNA of these bones 56% of the DNA of some of these Liqian residents today are of Caucasian origin, but the testing did not determine whether they were descended from Romans. But that is mad, and there's some pictures of them, and they do obviously still look quite Asian, but they don't look. You can tell they've got loads of Caucasian blood.
What should I search up to get this up, man?
Type in Liqian village residents. So Liqian village residents. Type up that, and then there's like girls with like blonde hair, and there's like a guy with like blue eyes. Even though he looks sort of Chinese, he's got like blue eyes. And it's interesting they're saying, the bones like were like bigger than the rest. So obviously when the Romans were there, I expect a couple of cheeky Roman traders and stuff did have a few rendezvous with some of the local lasses.
Yeah.
On these local things, and obviously had just suddenly implanted like Caucasian DNA into like what was before like 100% Asian DNA, which is really interesting, isn't it? And then it's just like trickled down, and I guess this small little village just had like a load of DNA in it, and where they've like stayed almost like a remote village for like the whole of history,
just kind of gone around,
stuck there as well.
Yeah.
Stayed there.
That's pretty interesting, isn't it?
It's mental.
And we're gonna listen to another track now, and then when we come back, I'm gonna bring you some Quickfire facts. You are listening to Pandora's Box with your host as always, Ebediah Pennywhistle. I just realised, we haven't even announced you guys today.
Yeah,
or
we
myself.
didn't. Never even an alias this week.
We know who we are by this point.
Yeah.
That's right.
Young Bullwinkle, Drupert LaRupert over here. Drew's got his nice cool new retro shirts on that he's rocking. I'm loving them, man.
Loving the
Good
retro
stuff.
shirts.
We hope that you're having a good evening out there, whatever you're doing. It's time for Quickfire Facts! It's time for Quickfire Facts. I've been really enjoying Quickfire Facts recently. Last week we left off with that mental story of the Iraq-Iran war. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, I remember that.
Where the
Iraqis
just incinerated all the Iranians with that electricity,
man,
and then
was so savage.
and then built a body.
The wall.
Yeah,
body wall.
Yeah, built a road.
Yeah, road
For all of their
Crazy.
forces to cross on. So Yeah, some of these facts are crazy, man. Whether it's because they're like grotesque or just funny, like that one with Lyndon B. Johnson, the American president, who just like weed on his bodyguard, and then when the bodyguard said about it, he was just like, "I know, that's my prerogative." I just like love these weird facts.
Yeah.
Apparently, Lyndon B. Johnson. It seems like it's like made up because of the fact his name was Johnson. But apparently, he used to like deliberately get his schlong out in public.
Yeah.
Quite
This is
often.
what I was saying to you. Apparently, this was like his thing.
Yeah,
like he did.
Which is hilarious because his name's
stuff.
Johnson, and apparently it's because he had a massive Johnson. So he would make a point of
proud of Johnson.
Yeah.
Was proud of his Johnson.
Apparently, it was like he had a huge schlong, so he would just get it out all the time, which is so hilarious for an American president. Apparently, he used to do like really funny baller stuff as well. Like apparently once he was like leaving the White House, and there were two helicopters. One of them the president's helicopter, and the other one was like his staff's. And he was walking towards the staff helicopter, and then apparently like his personnel went, sorry, excuse me, Mr. President, you're walking towards the wrong helicopter. This one's your helicopter. Apparently he looked at me and went, son, they're all my goddamn helicopters. And then he just got in that one, the one he was walking to, and just went off on that one. And it was just like,
God.
no, you guys can like work around me.
Yeah.
I just thought that's such like a baller thing to do, isn't it?
That's crazy.
What a legend. Anyway, time for our first quickfire fact of the day. Johan de Witt was a Dutch prime minister who became so unpopular during his reign that a bunch of rioters lynched and partially ate him in 1672. They were never prosecuted.
What? Say
What
that
did he
again,
do?
sorry?
They lynched and partially ate him. So they like ate part of his body. They lynched him and then ate part of his body.
What's lynched mean?
Like
think-
mobbed him.
Yeah.
So what was the start bit again?
Johan de Witt was a Dutch prime minister
Dutch prime minister
who became so unpopular during his reign that a bunch of rioters lynched and partially ate him in 1672, and they were never prosecuted.
What did he do?
Don't know, just super. I don't know what he did to become so unpopular.
What is it with like humans and eating people back in the day?
Yeah, it seems like quite
Is
common,
it-
doesn't
yeah,
it?
just like just gonna eat them.
Yeah.
Very strange, isn't it?
Yeah, mental.
Yeah. Shah Jahan was the architect who constructed the Taj Mahal, obviously an extremely famous building, one of the most famous buildings on the planet, notably in India. When Shah Jahan finished constructing the Taj Mahal, he had his minions cut off the hands of the workers after the structure was completed so that he could preserve the mausoleum's blessed significance. That's gruesome, isn't it?
Blessed significance.
He just had all of his minions cut off all the hands of the workers. That's savage, man. Life without your hands would suck.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Even with that one hand, it would suck.
Yeah.
But both of them, mega suck.
The things that people used to do, and it was just
brutal.
normal. It's crazy.
That's what makes me laugh. Like I remember there was this meme I saw recently, and it was like, it was just of a person, and it's like, God, why do you give me these trials? And then it was just like God back, and he was like saying, I'm literally just asking you to fold up your washing. And it just like makes me think of this situation. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, think about how, like nowadays we get so stressed about stuff like, oh, I'm so stressed because I haven't replied to this email, or like, oh yeah, I've got some dishes to do, and then it's like, man, the people that built the Taj Mahal they didn't even know it was going to happen, but they had their hands cut off against their will, just because this crazy architect thought like it was like would preserve the blessed significance of the building.
The blessed significance.
One hand is bad enough, but losing both is
I think
like,
at one hand would suck, but at least you could still eat with it. You could still like feel your partner.
if you fell over, you could like break your fall.
Yeah, you could hold your child's hand if you have any kids, or like you could, but to have no, like, you could put food into your mouth, but to just have no hands, that would proper suck, man.
When was the Taj Mahal built? Because I was going to say, I feel like nowadays they can do stuff where it's not going to be as bad. Like you could get a fake hand, you get two fake hands. Obviously, it's never good.
Yeah, they wouldn't have had like good prosthetics back in the day.
Yeah,
It would have been purely aesthetic. Like
Yeah.
Jamie Lannister in Game of Thrones. Like you could wear something that would like look like a hand, but that would be it. I think there was one account actually of like some really like wealthy European lord or king or something that actually had like a mechanical hand made that could grasp.
Whoa.
I can't remember what his name was. I'll look into it for next week's show. And I think there was like in medieval times, that was pretty cool. But he was like, by modern day standards, probably like a billionaire. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
This is like a weird tale that just goes to show how inbred the ancient Egyptians used to be. Ankh Hasanaman, King Tut's first wife, was his half sister, but she might have also been his actually full sister, and was also at one point his stepmother. How weird is that?
Whoa.
Sorry, say that one again.
So
It was his half sister.
Ankh Senamun was King Tut's first wife, and it was also his half-sister. But she was also, at one point before that, his stepmom. And it turns out archaeologists nowadays think that he might have actually not just been a half-sister, might have been a full sister.
Ooh.
So, but it was also his stepmom. So I guess
she was with his dad.
Yeah. So before he was the king, his sister was married to his father, and then after his father died, he then married who at that point was already his mum and his sister, and then it became his mum and his sister and his wife.
Why was his dad with his sister? Wasn't
his dad? So his dad was with his daughter.
Yeah. So why was his dad? Why was his dad with his daughter?
So his dad, because they were super inbred, the Egyptians.
Yeah.
So the Egyptian, so King Tut's dad married his daughter, who was King Tut's sister. Yeah.
So weird.
That's brutal.
But that's one of the reasons. So they think that Tutankhamun, they can tell by from actually accounts, but also from DNA testing on his body and stuff, that he was savagely deformed. And the reason why is inbreeding. Inbreeding obviously isn't just frowned upon because it's gross. It's also it's dangerous for the population.
Yeah.
Let's
keep those bloodlines.
Yeah. It's
strong.
You start getting physical deformities.
Yeah.
And apparently he was really short but had freakishly wide hips, and they can tell he had all these medical conditions and apparently he had
I've got up a photo of what he might have looked like.
Yeah, apparently he had massive weird features and stuff like that, and apparently it would have just been super sickly and super weird looking.
He looks so
Look at his
weird.
foot.
Yeah, so we've got Bullwinkle's got a picture of this up on the tubes for anybody that's listening there. So yeah, don't do any inbreeding then, people.
Yeah, that's our advice.
It's no good, is it? No good. At the temple of Aphrodite in Cyprus, overlooking the legendary birthplace of Aphrodite, young virgin girls would tie a bowstring around their head and await a man to come along and throw a silver coin of any value into their lap. The man would then say, "I demand thee in the name of the goddess." The girl then had to have sex with the man. This would make the women extremely happy, as in this way the girl would make her first fruit offering to Aphrodite, as it was known. So every time a man would pass and chuck them money and they would have sex, they would consider it a fruit offering to Aphrodite, they were giving Aphrodite their fruit, as well as the man, their fruit.
Doing it for the gods.
Yeah. I think that's another thing, a bit what we were saying about that Maori story. I think that some negative aspects of modern society nowadays make out that almost that it was so patriarchal back in the day or something. But these women were loving that. They wanted it to happen because that was almost their way of I guess they
honoring the god.
They saw that as that was their thing to honor their goddess Aphrodite. It was that was almost their ritual to show that they are a woman, and that was a blessing. And they were getting not only the silver from the man, but then performing that ritual was then their almost their religion. Oh man, I know some weird stuff about Rasputin, but this is I'll talk more in depth about Rasputin next week because he's a fascinating character. But just this little tidbit to get you started. Rasputin's remains were cremated to make sure he wasn't a zombie because people were that terrified of him in Russia. But only after they cut off his extraordinarily large penis and placed it in a museum. There's some weird stuff about Rasputin. He's almost credited with the downfall of the Tsars. People thought that he was amazingly supernatural, and apparently he could bewitch people. And there's those tales and rumors that apparently he was he's so hard to kill. He was killed.
I heard his death story.
Apparently he drank poison. Apparently they poisoned him, and he was just completely fine. So then apparently they shot him loads. And apparently he just started chasing his assassins around the palace and trying to kill them, and they just kept shooting him. And then they eventually shot him enough that he fell over, and then they were beating him with clubs, but he was still alive. So they wrapped him up in a carpet, tied rope around it, and then threw him in a frozen lake. Yeah. River,
he is pretty great. Even looking at the photos of him now, he looks kind of dead behind the eyes.
He looks creepy, man.
Yeah.
And apparently he used to have crazy orgies, and he managed to infiltrate the Tsars, which were obviously essentially the kings and queens of Russia.
Yeah.
Really weird.
So weird. It wasn't from his looks, was it?
No.
Do you remember in the past, Drew? I don't remember if you said, but I've said that basically you're the modern day Mozart. Because Mozart was notoriously he was a really talented musician, but he was also just hilariously crazy and would just do really crazy stuff. And this is another great Mozart fact. Mozart once composed a piece of music called Leck mich im Arsch, which translates in modern English to lick me in my arse.
That's amazing.
I can't remember which piece of music it was as well, but there was I almost like, for some reason I always picture like the other musician being Nicky C and you being Mozart, but there was this one where Mozart had agreed to write, like, at the time I think it might have been like the world's like most biggest and hyped up like theatre musical in the world, and Mozart had agreed to do it for like this, like some royalty in like France or something like that. It might have been Germany, I don't know, I don't know the details, and he'd agreed to do it, and then it was like the day before, like the debut of this thing, and then like his musician friend, I can't remember, I think it was like another famous musician, but his musician friend said to him like, oh, how's the composition then gone as he finished it, and then apparently he just went, oh my god, and then he like forgot, and then apparently he stayed up all night writing it, and it went on to become like one of his most famous ever compositions. But he wrote it all like in a rush, like late, like all through the night, and he like didn't sleep that night and everything, and then like rushed to like the palace in the morning with like all this music and was like, this is it. But he like completely forgot until his mate told him.
That's crazy.
That's like such like a you story too. It was like the other day, wasn't it, when you were like, yeah man, on like Tuesday, do you want to do this after Pandora's? And I was like, yeah, and then I was like, wait a minute, aren't you going to London? And you were like, oh yeah, actually I am.
Yeah.
That was good. That was a good one. Yeah. King David became king by cutting the foreskin off of people from their neighbouring lands and giving these severed foreskins to the king so that he could marry his daughter. The king asked for 100 foreskins, but David decided to return with 200 foreskins. The foreskins were accepted, and David got to marry Mahal.
He was happy.
What did the original king want with them?
He was pleased.
I have no idea. Just for some reason he wanted 100 foreskins, and he was super chuffed because he got 200 ones instead.
Man, the world is so weird.
Yeah. Mental. Spartan marriage involved a custom of capturing a woman, shaving her head, and then dressing her in a man's clothing. Then the groom/capturer would secretly visit her and finally sleep with her. All Spartans were required to marry by the age of 30. The Spartans were like interesting but funny.
But why the hell did they have to dress up as a man? And why would they want to?
Yeah, it's a bit suspect, isn't it? Bit strange.
So it's just their culture. Weird.
This is another one. Edward II was murdered at Berkeley Castle. I've been to Berkeley Castle, really nice castle. In Gloucester in 1327 by being held down and having a red-hot poker inserted inside his anus. His screams could apparently be heard for miles. This cruel torture was most probably devised as a punishment for his presumed sexual acts with men.
Whoa.
Bit dark, isn't it?
Yeah. Move on.
Speechless.
Catherine the Great had 22 male lovers and an erotic cabinet of highly eccentric furniture. Among these were tables that had massive large penises for legs, and vaginas carved out of chairs, and walls that were covered in erotic art and orgies. Interesting woman.
Yeah.
Bit of a nympho, old Catherine the Great.
I remember hearing Cara Delevingne or something like that. She's got like a tunnel that's like designed like a vagina.
Did you hear that it's come out during this case that Elon Musk had a threesome with Cara Delevingne and Amber Heard?
Yeah, I heard
during
that
the Johnny
he had
Depp
like an
case.
affair.
Apparently, I can't remember if they said it was
Depp.
like while. Yeah, I can't remember if they said it was like while Johnny Depp was with Amber Heard, but it was brought up during the case.
He never ceases to amaze me.
Elon Musk is like, yeah, he does he? Yeah. What a crazy guy. The executioners of the Ottoman Empire were never noted for their mercy. In 1622, Sultan Osman II suffered an excruciating death when he was just a teenager by compression of the testicles.
Oh, no.
As contemporary chroniclers put it, he died at the hands of an assassin who was known as Pehlivan, the oil wrestler, who crushed his testicles until he died.
Jesus.
Imagine just dying.
That is brutal. That is so brutal.
Oh, man.
Imagine getting your testicles crushed until you died.
I didn't know it caused death, but...
Yeah, I guess like
imagine the pain.
You can die of shock, can't you?
Shock and
I reckon
pain
that. Yeah, I reckon
blood
it was that. Yeah.
Jesus.
Hitler was a creepy uncle. He had a niece called Geli Rabal, who he forbid to ever marry, and he made sure that she was accompanied by him everywhere, and practically kept her prisoner until she eventually committed suicide in 1931. Creepily, after her death, Hitler said, "That was the only woman I ever loved."
Oh.
Weirdo.
I kind of suspect that of Adolf.
I sort of suspect that of old Hitler.
Yeah.
Bit of a weird pedo. Incestuous pedo.
Oh.
Weird guy.
When Genghis Khan sent a trade caravan to the Khwarezmid Empire, the governor called Inalchuk of one city seized it and killed all of Genghis Khan's traders. Genghis Khan then retaliated by invading the empire with 200,000 men and killed the governor by melting silver until it was molten and then poured it down his eyes and mouth until he had died. That was that was the inspiration for that in Game of Thrones. That was definitely the inspiration for that.
You seen that bit on Game of Thrones?
No.
It's a good
That
bit.
sounds brutal.
The crown fit for a king.
Yeah,
Pours that
Oh my
molten
God.
silver in his head and then he's like, That'd be a savage way to die, man. Imagine like feeling the silver.
Any of these that
almost
we've heard today, I'm like,
oh yeah,
no, thank you.
Brutal,
Damn, man.
brutal. Gandhi often slept and bathed naked with other women, including his grandniece and the wife of his grandnephew, who were both 18 when they started sleeping with him in the same bed. Gandhi was 77 years old at the time.
Mental.
Fair shout, Gandhi.
He's another one of those people we were talking about last week with Mother Teresa.
He's a bit controversial nowadays.
He's
yeah.
like, apparently, allegedly, he was like a really bad person.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah. He was definitely bad in some ways. I think nowadays he's considered almost like a hypocrite because he did a lot of good things for the people of India, but he was also like randomly racist himself. So he was super against the idea that white people would look down on like Indian people, but he also himself looked down very much on African people.
Yeah.
So he went on record as saying things that like he thought that white people and Asians were equal, but he thought that African descended people were below them. So it's like, well, that's a bit...
Like, yeah, he'd call them names, and apparently as well, one more thing, he was like, apparently he was really for, like, Hitler.
Was he?
Or not for Hitler, like, he wasn't for Hitler, but he wanted all of Britain and all of the ally forces to just stand down and let Hitler do whatever he wanted, apparently.
I've never heard that. I'll have to look into that more, and we'll talk about that maybe.
I'll say
on a future
allegedly.
one. Yeah. I've never heard that.
From what I've heard, I was watching a video on it, and it was saying that was a thing. I remember hearing one more story too about him, where apparently he was really against taking medicine and everything, and his wife or something died of this disease.
I know he used to beat his wife.
Yeah, so she died of this disease when she could have been saved via medicine. He was like, you can't take it. That's like against my thing.
Yeah, I think I heard that.
And
actually,
then he got the same disease
and then took the medicine. Yeah.
Mental.
I heard that he was like sexist and racist, but it's like weird because he was like really did a lot for the Indian people.
Yeah,
so it's like,
definitely.
it doesn't stop the fact that he did good stuff for his own country.
Yeah.
But then it's also like a bit weird that he was also racist towards black people and also sexist. And he also would do weird stuff like sleep with his like 17-year-old grandniece when he was like in his 70s.
I say again, people in the world are weird.
They definitely are, man. Anyway, we've come to the end of another episode of Pandora's Box this week. Thanks for chilling with us, everybody. We'll be back again next week with some more interesting factoids and discussions for y'all. Until then, have a great week, everybody. We love you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.